A very good morning to one and all. I am P. Rajkiran, Assistant Professor of English and one of the coordinators of the 4-day webinar on strategies for effective assessing and teaching. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for joining the webinar. Now, I'd like to invite all the delegates to the webinar. First, I'd like to invite Dr. Leena Mahopadhyay, our resource person who has been working as an associate professor IFLU University. Next, I'd like to invite our dynamic principal, Dr. P. Ravindra Babu. I'd like to invite our beloved vice principal academics, Dr. Prasad Garu, and beloved vice principal administration, B. Karun Kumar Garu, Dr. Ramanujam Pathasarathi, Senior Professor, Director, ELT Center, Dr. M. Vijayalakshmi, Head of the Department English and the convener of the workshop, mentors, heads of the departments, and all my dear participants. A very warm welcome to the 4-day webinar on strategies for effective assessing and teaching. At the outset, let me thank all the participants for making this national webinar as an international webinar, because there was an overwhelming response from all the participants. We have received registration across the country, and we have also received many registrations from the other countries like Bangladesh, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Singapore, and so on. Thank you very much for your response. Now, I'd like to invite our dynamic principal, Dr. P. Ravindra Babu Garu, to address the gathering. Sir, could you please address the gathering?
Is it audible, Rajkiran?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, good morning, all of you. I welcome all the participants to this webinar, and I also welcome the experts for the 4-day webinar, especially Madam Leena Mahopadhyay from IFLU University. Welcome, Madam. Especially about our college. It was established 22 years back in the year 1998. Subsequently, we got accreditations. Recently, we got accreditation for eligible branches under Tier 1. That is a happy note. Having autonomous status, having NAAC A grade. So all these parameters we are getting through the quality of education. So one of the vital element in any type of assessing the quality parameter is teaching and learning process. Today, it is the order of the day to assess the teacher, to assess the student, and also the third parameter we are happening is a parent also. So with this, I request all the participants, please make use of this webinar, wholeheartedly participate in this and get the information and enjoy. I wish you all the best, especially my sincere thanks to the organizing team, convener and my colleagues, and also my sincere thanks to the person behind the entire webinar, Dr. Parthasarathi Ramanujam Garu. I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your warm greetings. Now, I'd like to request our Vice Principal Academics, Dr. Prasad Garu, to address the gathering.
Hello, is it audible, Rajkiran Garu? My voice is audible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Coordinator of this webinar, Mr. Rajkiran, Head of the Department of English, Vijayalakshmi Garu, and Director, ELT Center, Dr. Ramanujam Pathasarathi Garu, and our beloved Vice Principal Administration, Karun Kumar Garu, our Honorable Principal, Dr. P. Ravindra Babu Garu, and today's speaker, Lena Mahopadhyaya. Good morning to all of you. Definitely, this is the most important webinar to all the faculty members. The reason was, in the present dynamic situation, every faculty member should adjust into the situation. Accordingly, we have to know much about the latest teaching methodologies, and similarly, equally important, the testing methodologies. So this type of webinar will help all the faculty members to understand the latest methodologies that are to be adopted by the faculty members to adjust the needs of the students, both in teaching and also the assessing techniques. So this is a good initiative by the Department of English. Let me thank the head of the department and the organizer and other faculty members, and especially my sincere thanks to our director, Ramanujam Parthasarathy Garu, to guide, to conduct this webinar. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. All the best. Thank you. Over to Raj Karan.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Sir.
Hello. ఏంటి కనుక్కో మీటింగ్లో ఉన్నాను ప్రొడ్యూసర్. హలో.
Audible. Yes, you can speak currently.
Hello. Good
Your
morning.
voice is audible. We can.
అదే
Continue.
రెస్పెక్టెడ్ ప్రిన్సిపల్ డాక్టర్ రవీంద్ర బాబు గారు అండ్ అడ్వైజర్ ఆఫ్ దిస్ వెబినార్ అండ్ డైరెక్టర్ రియల్టీ సెంటర్ డాక్టర్ రామానందన్ పార్థసారథి గారు అండ్ కన్వీనర్ ఆఫ్ దిస్ వెబినార్ అండ్ హెడ్ ఆఫ్ ది డిపార్ట్మెంట్ డాక్టర్ విజయలక్ష్మి, coordinators Raj Kumar and Raj Kiran and other faculty members of English. A very good morning to one and all, and my sincere regards to all the resource persons who accepted to deliver their talk on the most useful and the most reinforcing tool that is called assessing, which is very much essential for refining and redefining the teaching styles or strategies in order to have productive outcomes. And it's a very, very good topic. I do congratulate from the bottom of my heart the Department of English, and I wish all the participants to make use of this opportunity to probe into the topic and to understand and digest the concepts and to get the doubts clarified, and I wish them all the best. Once again, I congratulate the convener and coordinates of the webinar. Let the webinar be a grand success. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you. Over to Raj Kiran. Hello.
Thank you very much, sir, for your words. Now I would like to invite Dr. M. Vijayalakshmi, the convener of the workshop, to give her speech and also introduce today's resource person.
Esteemed Principal of our college, Dr. P. Ravindra Babu, eminent Vice Principal, Dr. G. Prasad. He is also the Vice Principal of our academics, and veteran Vice Principal, Administration, Dr. B. Karan Kumar, distinguished Director of our English Language Teaching Center, Dr. P. Ramanujam, and the eminent resource person of the today's webinar, Dr. P. Lena Mukhopadhyaya, and Venerable Professor respected S.R.K. Reddy, and my gurus and mentors, Dr. Professor Prakasham and Dr. Haripadma Rani, and also the HODs of the various departments, the coordinators of the webinar, Mr. Rajkumar and Mr. Rajkiran, and all my colleagues who are involved in this 4-day webinar, and the principals and advisors of our sister institutes, and the enthusiastic participants of the 4 days webinar. Welcome everyone, and I warmly invite all of you to this 4-day webinar on strategies for effective assessing and teaching. As you all know that this 4-day webinar has 4 sessions. The first session will be held by Dr. Leena Mukhopadhyay on performance-based language assessment for English, ESL, English as secondary language classrooms, issues and challenges. The second and the third day webinars will be held by Dr. Rama Matthew on transformative assessment and also how to keep growing and learning as teachers. And the last session of the webinar will be taken by Dr. Vijaya Srivatsava on online assessment, new tools and challenges. And I hope all the sessions of the webinar will be of great use to you in making yourselves better assessors and teachers. And before we begin the webinar, I would like to take the opportunity of inviting as well as introducing the resource person of today's webinar, Dr. Leena Mukhopadhyay, to you. Dr. Leena Mukhopadhyay is an associate professor of English in English and Foreign Languages University, and she has coordinated the various programs, and she's also a member for various programs offered by the University of English and Foreign Languages. She presented 35 papers in various national and international conferences, and she also conducted more than 15 workshops, both in India and abroad. She also chaired a few sessions as a panelist. She has published 22 papers in various reputed national and international journals and also has contributed for the publication of 12 books. She completed 4 prestigious projects and she is currently working for 2 major research projects. She has taught several courses at the EFLU and conducted more than a dozen international training programs. She taught at 2 universities in Germany under the Teacher Exchange Program, and she completed e-teacher scholarship programs in the USA. Under her supervision, 2 PhDs and 15 MPhils have been awarded, and she has been even guiding 6 more PhDs. And she has 20 awards and scholarships to her credit. And now, I take the privilege and honor of inviting the resource person of today's webinar, Dr. Leena Mukhopadhyay, to make her presentation. Madam, would you please make the presentation? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Vijay Lakshmi, for your kind words of appreciation and for inviting me to take a session for this webinar. Am I audible?
Yes, madam, you are audible.
Yes.
You are audible.
If everyone can kindly switch off their videos, I think the bandwidth will be a little better, and then we can do the presentation. Thank you. So just give me a moment to share the content and then we will begin.
Yeah, Leena, madam, just minimize your screen and then you will be directed to desktop. Minimize your team screen.
It has been sent, right, to the live session?
Yeah, live session desktop is shared. You just minimize the Teams application.
I'll do that.
Yeah, okay, ma'am.
Kindly let me know if the screen is showing.
Yeah, we can see, madam. Yes, madam.
So without many more words on introduction, I will begin the presentation. And as Dr. Vijay Lakshmi pointed out, that today we would have a small session on performance-based language assessment. And this would be for the classroom space. So here I would not be concentrating so much about the summative examination or standardized examinations, but it would be more as a teaching tool for the teachers, and that's why I've selected this topic for today's discussion, because it is something that I thought would be useful for most of the language teachers and young researchers. So that is why at the offset, at the beginning, I would like to say that the scope of this kind of assessment is only for language teachers within the classroom. It might not be applicable for summative examination setup. Right. So why did one of the things which motivated me to take up this topic is the current situation of the pandemic, and we all need to start thinking about. All of you have already started thinking about education in a different way, because we have had to change our years of teaching and assessment practice couple of months. And so the situation has pushed us for good, I think. So there are lots of negatives to the situation, but this, I think, is a very positive outcome, that we have to rethink our methods of teaching and assessment. And it has given us an opportunity to do so because it's the need of the hour. So this is a picture which I picked up from one of the webinars that I attended as part of research learning outcomes, and how things could be done differently for education and research. And I thought it would be a nice moment, to also relate it to the concept of assessment, because assessment is something that we teachers do hand in hand with teaching almost every day. Some of it is formally documented, but a lot of it is happening in our minds when we see the students working, when we look at their eyes, we make eye contact, we look at their facial expressions, and we realize what kind of effort they are putting in, or if they are absent-minded, they are not able to follow what's happening in the class, so on and so forth. So this COVID situation has taken away all that from us, and we have had to shift from physical classrooms to virtual classrooms with very, very minimal amount of preparation, and that has thrown us into a situation that we have to think on our feet. And therefore, it is very important that we try to think about assessment, all that we were doing in class along with our students, how we could recreate a situation where some of it can be retained or some of it can be brought back. So in that spirit, I would be making this presentation, and I hope you would have some takeaways, which you can use in your respective contexts, and we could have a discussion after the presentation. So my presentation would be roughly around 45 to 50 minutes. And then we would open the session for question answers, when you can ask all your questions, and I would be very happy to answer your questions to the best of my ability. So this is what we are going to do today. We are going to look at these 4 questions in the presentation in terms of what is performance-based assessment, why does the current pandemic require us to do this assessment, some examples of performance-based assessment, and how can we practice this assessment to satisfy the golden 5 principles of assessment, so that it becomes like a fair system of assessment, and students are not at a disadvantage because of practicing this mode of assessment. So we'll look at the first question, that what is performance-based assessment, and we will look at a few of the basic characteristics of the assessment, and then I would also give you a small description of in what context this kind of assessment has originated, and the extent to which it is used worldwide, in schools in the US, UK, Australia, Canada. So they have embraced this kind of assessment long back, almost 3 decades back. And so they are in a way, and they have reaped the benefits of it. So that is why, I think as an assessor, as a teacher, that if there is something that we can do to increase the knowledge base of our students in a methodical, systematic manner, one way of doing that would be practicing performance-based assessment. So what is performance-based assessment? So it is a set of strategies for the acquisition and application. So the word application is very important here. Application of knowledge, skills, and at times it can be work habits as well, through the performance of tasks that are meaningful and engaging to the students. So when students participate in tasks that have real life connections, they feel more motivated. They take charge of their learning. They become more responsible. So therefore, when we look at their actual performance of using a knowledge base, and in this case, it would be the target language, like I have, if you can look at my mouse cursor, that in this case, the performance would be on the target language. And you can imagine this to be English, but if you are, a content teacher of mathematics or geography or sciences or any other language apart from English, this is applicable to those concepts as well, right? So here it would be the performance or using of the target language for primarily two reasons, which are very close to the student needs. One is the academic purposes, so study skills with which they can learn other subjects, and for real life communication in a variety of contexts. So when students perform using the target language, then they give us a sense of their application of the knowledge of the target language. And therefore, it becomes very, very significant for us. It becomes like a holistic, measurement of their language ability. So we are not using, indirect measure of their grammar rules by using multiple choice options and using language in a very truncated manner. Rather, performance-based assessment would mean that they are using language for real life purposes. And when they are doing so, we get an estimate of their knowledge of the language. So that is the base of performance-based language assessment. So this is a rationale for using performance-based language assessment, that developing language proficiency in the medium of instruction, and in this case, most of us are using English as the medium of instruction, is important not for its own sake, but because students need to comprehend what they read in other subjects and express their understanding using that language. Therefore, the development of the knowledge of medium of instruction is very important because it serves as a learning tool, the main learning tool with which they can comprehend other subjects and they can express their understanding of other subjects. So it's very fundamental to their knowledge base. So an intermediate to advanced level language proficiency is most often a necessary attribute, and I'm pitching this at the level of, I'm just taking a shot in the dark and I'm pitching it at the level of college teachers, university teachers and higher education, but much of it is also applicable for primary and secondary education. So if there are some teachers today who are attending this session and belong to primary and secondary education, there are implications of performance-based assessment even there, but I am pitching my session for teachers who are engaging with learners who have had the exposure to the medium of instruction as English for at least 5 to 7 years. Therefore, I have put down intermediate to advanced level language proficiency is a necessary attribute as it helps them to learn, gather knowledge and draw from the academic community, that they can draw from their teachers, they can draw from their library, they can draw from the books that they read. So in order to do all this, they need a threshold level proficiency, without which it will not be very easy for them to transact knowledge, navigate through other subjects, so on and so forth. So development of content knowledge and its application can be enhanced only if cognitive academic language proficiency, a construct which was brought out by Jim Cummins way back in 1976, as a result of his experiments with the Canadian immersion program, So that aspect of language proficiency, so it is not general English proficiency, but the CALP proficiency. So it's called Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency, or the acronym CALP, is strongly developed in the medium of instruction. And this can be also done through multilingual resources. It is a huge topic by itself. I'm not going to talk about that today because it's outside the purview of our presentation today. But the development of the MOI can also happen through multilingual resources. Okay, so now what we need to understand is this variety of the target language, namely CALP variety, is often not available at home for many of our students. And to develop this in Indian multilingual students is a big challenge for language and content instructors. And therefore, to use performance-based language assessment, to assess students' academic language of the medium of instruction becomes a challenging task. But both language teachers and content teachers can participate in this process. Okay, so to summarize what we were discussing, in its simplest form, a performance-based assessment or a form of alternative assessment, sometimes it comes under the rubric of alternative assessment, is one which requires our students to demonstrate. So when they perform, they demonstrate to us that they have acquired or mastered certain skills and competencies by performing or producing something. So what is that something? That something is producing something in the target language for academic reasons or for communication reasons, right? Now, as teachers, we as one of the important stakeholders of assessment, along with parents and students, how can we get this information from students? So this is what the entire session is built around, that how can we as teachers get information from students about their underlying language proficiency, while they act or while they perform on the academic aspect of the language. And in some cases, they can also perform on the communicative aspect of language. And there is, in fact, a whole new branch of performance-based language assessment, which looks at workplace communication. So today, I'm not going to look at workplace communication. It is purely for the ESL classroom teachers who need it for academic reasons. So this is something that we need to understand, that performance-based assessment is not a one-shot assessment. It does not get over at one time when we are going to use it for classroom purposes. We have the luxury of time because the students stay with us at least for 3 months to 6 months in a semester, or for an entire year for systems where an annual year or an academic year is used as the development of one particular subject or course. So the students do spend a long time with us, and we don't need to be in a hurry to do one-shot assessments or tests, which get over in 1 hour or 2 hours or a week. So we can create student estimates over time, and that is what the arrow mark indicates. This diagram indicates creating student estimates over time and creating the concept of building the concept of communicative competence. And I've given one example, like say, for example, the teacher begins the course with some unit-based reading comprehension, which is true of language teachers as well as content teachers. And then this can be linked to integrated speaking. For example, I'm just giving an example. And it could be done through mini group discussions or maybe pair discussions, right? So the reading that has happened on the unit can be applied to a couple of speaking activities, and then it can be integrated to writing. So what do we see in this picture? That we have integration of skills across the course, right? And we are creating student estimates across these skills, thereby coming up with a holistic estimate of the students over time, which will complement our teaching procedure. And then we can have, as a complementary mode, we could have the end term exam, we could have the, internal tests, whatever. But essentially, the spirit of performance-based assessment is moving from point A to point B to point C, which which could be considered hypothetically the end of the course, that during the course, whatever the students have done, I retain a systematic method or a systematic way of retaining their performances and thereby building an estimate over time. And let me tell you, this is not easy. This is a very, very laborious process, but the perks or the advantages of this kind of an assessment are so much that I think many of us would feel enthusiastic to use this kind of assessment. So this is the spirit of performance-based assessment, and in a little while, I will also show you more detailed examples of how we could do performance-based language assessment. But what we need to, tell ourselves that we have to prepare ourselves to move out of our, comfort zones of doing one-shot assessments and moving into a paradigm where we can create student estimates little by little over time and give them interim feedback. And finally, the estimate that we build after a point of time, that will be a more holistic picture. It will be more satisfactory for the learners, and we as teachers can reflect a lot about the student growth. Okay, now I'll give you a very brief description of why performance-based assessment emerged, or in which condition, in which situation in history did this type of assessment begin or emerge. So 1940s till the 1960s, beginning from the two world wars till the 1960s, the period of structuralism, psychometric tests and discrete point tests were considered the most scientific way to assess knowledge of abstract rules of the target language. So the concept of the construct of language proficiency was to assess the abstract rules of the target language, meaning mostly the rules of grammar and at times rules of summarizing by reading a text and putting a open-ended summary. And this was done because they thought that these tests had good enough power to predict success in the target language. So that is why they believe these to be very scientifically constructed, which we are not at all, questioning. It is still true today, but by the end of 1960s and 70s, the construct of communicative competence of language, so going from abstract rules of the target language, that is an antecedent of a communicative competence construct. So the communicative competence construct was a new way of looking at knowledge of the target language. So this construct, Delheims came up with this construct, and then Merrill Swain and Michael Canale applied this construct to teaching and assessment. So that is where the application of this construct came to teaching and assessment. And later, other language teaching, language assessment experts like Buckman, Palmer, McNamara took it forward in the 1990s as performance-based assessment. And what is most surprising is schools in the US, UK, Canada, Australia adopted this form of assessment and started reaping benefits of it from the early 1980s. So think about that, 3 decades before they have started using this kind of assessment. And this kind of assessment proved, psychologically so much useful because it could create holistic estimates of learners that even standardized tests like TOEFL and IELTS, which invests a lot of money in producing, test items and validating them and getting them scientifically approved and making sure that there are less number of errors in assessment, so on and so forth. Even they did a lot of research for more than a decade, and at the beginning of the 21st century, they adopted this construct into their testing system. So that is the success of performance-based assessment. But we are not going to discuss today about that because I'm more interested in talking to you about the application of this concept into the classroom space. So now we move to the second question, that why does the current pandemic require us to use this assessment? So let us look at that. So all of us, teachers as well as students and researchers, have had to move from physical classrooms to virtual classrooms within a few weeks. So the transition was like very, very fast. And we, as I said at the beginning of my presentation, that we hardly had any preparedness, to do this kind of a transition. And yet we had to do it because we had to live up to the situation. So in the virtual classroom, understanding and evaluating what each student has comprehended or acquired becomes difficult to gauge. Pencil and paper test with discrete items and assessment of what students can remember therefore becomes tricky, as it comes with the challenges of students copying from each other. So many of us feel apprehensive that if we give this kind of a test, that chances are students would copy from each other because we are expecting only one correct or accurate answer. Therefore, memory-based test does not much appeal to the students and could give rise to a lot of test anxiety. Yeah. So these are some of the challenges that the current pandemic situation has thrown us into. So as teachers and assessors, we have a big responsibility to ensure that learning continues. Whatever may be the case, the learning continues. So our task is to creatively engage students and use their efforts for real-time performance, where they can learn through group collaboration as well as at their own pace. So this is very important, that we give them space, of time and resources that they can learn at their own pace. In this scenario, performance-based assessment is likely to work well, as students will be expected to do something. They can channelize their energies to do something and not be receptive, receptors of knowledge and receive knowledge and only prepare for one-time tests or one-shot tests. So they will be expected to do something meaningful, namely apply knowledge, be creative, be resourceful and collaborative. They can therefore take more responsibility of what they learn from the context of their home. So they have the comfort of their home, which has now transformed into their new classroom, right? So that is the challenge that they have to create the classroom environment. So it's a big responsibility for them as well, isn't it? So in their new classroom, if we give them the challenge of doing something real life, they will find it more meaningful and they would be urged to be more creative and collaborative. But it comes with a big but. To introduce this form of assessment, we as teachers consciously need to move out of our comfort zones of traditional assessment of learning to assessment for learning. So we keep aside assessment of learning in the summative examination format, that can happen at the end of the course or end of the academic year. But right now, let us concentrate on, giving to our students and learners something meaningful, and through that they can easily, acquire the knowledge of target language, which otherwise they would not have been pushed to doing, right? So we are moving from assessment of learning to assessment for learning. So the assessment will actually become an opportunity to learn. It will complement teaching in a more closely aligned manner. So this is what it can look as a model, so we can have tests and assessments both for language and content. So many of us, I know, are teachers who teach only language, who teach content and language, and who teach language through content. So therefore, for all of these models, we can have tests and assessments, which is commonsensical. But then on one end, we have traditional forms of tests and assessments like MCQs, multiple choice questions, and short and essay type questions, which require learners to show understanding of abstract rules of the language, or what they have comprehended immediately, or what they can recall from memory. So this is the scope of traditional one-time tests or assessment. Whereas we have another form of assessment, which are the alternative assessments, within which performance-based assessment is one subtype. However, for this conscious move, if you look at the cube, teacher preparedness is a big factor for success. So unless we are motivated, unless we are prepared, unless we have the knowledge to do this, it is not likely to be successful. And therefore, this presentation, that it is going to raise our awareness. Many of us, I think, are already doing this, in your context, doing wonderful jobs to deal with your students, their anxieties, their learning trajectories, etc., etc. But if today, let us take the time, to consolidate our understanding, look into our anxieties, and see if we can do something good for our students, in addition to what we have been doing. Therefore, teacher preparedness is a big factor in its success. Okay, so now that we have looked at what are the basic characteristics of performance-based assessment and how the current pandemic situation requires us to use this assessment, let us try and look into the third question. And I think this is a very, very fundamental question to this presentation, that what are some of the examples of performance-based language assessment? Now, as we discuss the examples, you will see two things. One is they are all in the model of, building student estimates over time. That's number one. And number two, they are all integrated forms of assessment. So there is no truncating of grammar, vocabulary, reading, writing, speaking, listening separately. It is all rolled into one in a very systematic manner and creating student estimates over time. Okay, so this is fundamental to all the examples that I would show. And the third point that I would like you to keep in mind is most of the examples are pitched at the intermediate to high to advanced level of proficiency of the learners, meaning I have kept young adults in my mind when I have prepared this presentation. Okay, so the examples are for that. But if you want to scale it down for primary level or secondary level, it is equally applicable. Okay, so we can discuss about that some other day. So let us look at 3 examples of performance-based language assessment, all of which, let me tell you, I have drawn closely from my researchers, 3 of my researchers who have submitted their PhDs in there, and I think they are present amongst the attendees today. And I'm very proud to share their work because I have learned a lot from their work through these examples that I would now show. Okay, so the first example is related to one of the very, very important cognitive academic language proficiency skills, namely reading, which is fundamental and basic to any course, be it a reading course or a content course. So we could have 6 stages of creating performance-based assessment, and at every stage, there is a mini assessment through which we are going to build student estimates. Okay, and if you look at my box on the right, where my cursor is now, look at what is indicated. Teachers can choose and give feedback on a select few aspects that students can deal with at their level of proficiency. So it is upon us as teachers to pick and choose. Okay, like when we go to a hotel or a restaurant, we look at the menu, but as one person, can we take everything that is on the menu? It is impossible, right? We would either have a stomach upset or we have to be hospitalized. It would be like major indigestion, isn't it? So, although it's a mundane example, but it actually fits into this concept that we have a larger menu from which we can choose on what to give feedback to our learners. And as long as we do that uniformly and systematically and consistently, learners are going to reap benefits from our feedback. So selection of what we need to give feedback on is on us as teachers, right? So we begin with the reading of a text, which requires comprehension skills. So I'm not looking at lower level skills like development of grammar, vocabulary, word decoding, etc., etc. So I'm beginning with reading for comprehension. So after reading a text, what are the subsequent activities that the learners can be engaged in? All of this required them to creatively engage with the text. And they can do that in the isolation of their homes. They can do that with peers, by making a phone call, or these days kids are very, very tech savvy. So they are almost always present on WhatsApp, Instagram, etc., etc. So they can also, collaborate with each other. So one of the things which we can make them do is to create a text map, which means a diagrammatic or a tabular representation to show the filtering and identification of main ideas, which is the base of comprehension, right? And it can be done across subjects, any content knowledge. And then they can be made to answer a few inline comprehension questions where you can bring in MCQs if you wish to, a short quiz and things like that. So in terms of doing the text map and then doing the inline comprehension, they can then be, once you know that they have a sense of what the text is or a couple of texts are, they can convert the text map to a text summary. So it would be like looking at print, print comprehension, converting it into a diagram, and then again reconverting the diagram into a text of their own. So when they summarize or they paraphrase, they perform on the target language. They actually use the rules of grammar, vocabulary, comprehension, writing knowledge. Everything is it comes under one umbrella. Yeah, and it becomes a performance of a real life task because it's an important study skill and they feel motivated to do it. At a higher level, they can be asked to integrate text summaries, compare contrast, critique the texts, etc., etc. So building student estimates over time, and therefore all of this can be systematically preserved by either the teacher or the students or both into the format of a reading portfolio. And let me tell you, you don't need to do it for every student. You can create small buddy groups, in which you can try out these activities. So this is one example. The second, okay, I'll spend a little more time on this example. So when looking at the text map, what can the teachers ask the students to notice or pay more attention to? So links between ideas, which could be causal, A causes B, B leads to A, so on and so forth, temporal, first, second, third, fourth, so temporal links and various other links. And so they can be made to look at idea units or propositions, which are monoclausal units. So every unit that has a main verb, would be an idea unit. And then they can look at links between idea units, and therefore they can construct summary-based proposition in order to get a sense of what are the main ideas of the text as well as the argumentation of the text. And you can also assess their use of grammar, vocabulary, linkers, and discourse structure. So one assessment of reading comprehension has so many offshoots of assessment. And this is what I meant when I said that teachers can choose and give feedback on a few aspects that students can deal with at their existing level of proficiency. Let us now move into the next example. So this is a writing example, again, something that many of us use it very frequently in our courses. So again, as you can see, if you look at my cursor, that writing portfolios can be built over time, and how we can have a written response, and then at a second level, they have to rework on the response. So the written response is not treated as a product that we look at it, we grade it, and we leave it at that. We take it forward. Therefore, it is building student estimate over time. So students revise based on teacher feedback, but students don't participate in creating the feedback. Okay, so therefore it is called unmediated revision. At a later point, when students are more confident of their writing, and they have grown the habit of writing, they can write another response with the extension of the topic. So there is no need to abort the topic. The topic can be continued. So therefore, the students can be made to ask to research, online, find out a little more information or some more sources and integrate it with their primary writing or their original draft. And then there can be teacher, student or peer group, conferencing to revise the text together. So the onus is both on the teacher and the student. And it feels as though they are coming up with a collaborative writing, that the writing belongs to both the parties, both the stakeholders. It's not only the student who is like looked at, with a magnifying glass that how are you performing. So we are not judging them for their one-time performance. So this is an example of mediated revision. And this cycle can be continued maybe once or twice during the course, and therefore a reading portfolio can be built. If you have, very advanced level learners who are doing a management course or maybe a research in MPhil or PhD or Masters in English, they can benefit from this kind of a cycle, and you can do this more frequently, right? So that is the scope of this example. Let us move into the third example and the last example. And here, if you look at my cursor, it is speaking portfolios that can be built over time. Again, another fundamental aspect which language teachers, and it can also be utilized by content teachers, as a aspect of teaching and assessment. So we could have, simple tasks like telling a story or describing wordless picture strips. Yes, and you can ask your students to send voice messages because these are monologues, right? So they can send, and believe me, they will find it very, very useful and very enjoyable. I've tried it out with my students and they really loved, when I listened to their voice and gave them feedback on the basis of. So they feel the onus, that they're doing something natural. They're doing something as an extension of real life need. And in the process, even before noticing, they have acquired so much of study skills that they can listen to they can listen to a source, or they can look at a story or a picture and they can describe it using voice messages. Then we could increase. So if you look at the right hand side, increase task complexity over time. So you can include more features into the task. So they can now describe pictures with more features. So earlier, if it was a single picture, now it can be more number of pictures, or maybe 2 pictures which contrast with each other. Yes. Then they can move into, conversation. So communicational competence. So this, the 1 and 2 are monologues, whereas 3 and 4 are dialogue. So they can participate in, simple context, or, things which are relevant in the current context. They can participate in mini conversations. You could prepare some topics for them, some role cards. Yes. And over a period of time, more features could be added to conversations, more speakers could be added to conversations, and therefore the increase in task complexity will push them to use language at an advanced level. So their use of grammar, their use of vocabulary, their use of discourse structure will get refined over time. But you have another role, that do not forget to include feedback. Yes, like I included in the writing portfolio, that you can have unmediated revision and mediated revision. Similar model can also be brought into speaking portfolios. Right. So with that, we end the examples of performance-based language assessment, and I hope you have got some, concrete ideas as to how to take it forward. Now let us move on. So how to evaluate performance-based language assessment? Very, very, very important, right? So one of the ways in which performance-based language assessment can be successful is if we have prepared ourselves systematically to evaluate performance-based language assessment in a fair and systematic manner. So there are various models, but today for you, I have chosen a very, very simple model of rubrics. It's called CLO, C-L-O. So content, language, organization. So content would be based on the selection of the main ideas. Language can be 1 or 2 areas of grammar or vocab or discourse structure as you feel, important. So this is a decision you have to take. You have to create a checklist for yourself, that what aspects you want to trace throughout the performance-based assessment. So select 1 or 2 areas, like for example, tense uniformity, or subject-verb agreement is something that you could work throughout the semester or throughout the course, and learners will find it beneficial to get focused feedback on 1 or 2 areas. And for organization, you could help them look for links between ideas using linkers, without linkers, right? And we need to keep in mind that some tasks, like creating text maps or maybe short voice messages, need not have extended responses. So we need to create a working key accordingly using the rubric CLE. Okay, and a very, very important tip: we have to get out of our mindset, to look for one correct answer. That is convenient, I know. We feel it is more scientific, but that is not how we use language in the real life, right? So language use is so, it's multifaceted. It is various. It is like, it has multiple features and multiple variations. And that's why there is this beauty of communication, that no 2 people on earth would speak in the same manner, right? So why should we expect our learners to perform in the same manner? Yes. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. Okay, now we move to the last part of the presentation, how to practice this assessment to satisfy the 5 principles of assessment. Here, I would take you through a little bit of theorization, so please bear with me. And if you have further questions, there is a source that I have given you, at the end of my slide, which you can refer to if you need more information about the last point. But I would try to give you a quick overview, a sneak peek into how we can do that. So why do we need to practice this assessment to satisfy the 5 principles of assessment? Is because we want to establish the validity and reliability of this assessment, that nobody can question us, that we have not done a good job or a fair job or a systematic job. So we have to be ethical, we have to be fair to our student needs, we have to be transparent to them. Only then will they value this kind of assessment, and will they take it forward. Because unless they take it forward, no matter how prepared we are, we will never be successful, isn't it? I'm sure all of you will agree with me on that, that we need to take students' confidence. We need to make them feel, connected to what we are doing. So In order to practice this assessment, to satisfy the 5 principles of assessment, there are certain questions we need to ask ourselves. And this could be related to, you can imagine a unit that you are teaching or any course that you are teaching. So you need to ask yourselves these questions. Do you know what your learners need to be assessed on? Can you define their learning objectives? Can you translate these learning objectives into applicable assessment formats? Do you know how to choose your test items, arrange them sequentially, like using task characteristics and so on? Do you know how to evaluate your students? Do you think giving feedback to your students is important? Do you feel confident doing this? And very importantly, have you ever been trained professionally to do questions 1 to 6? The crux of making this assessment into a reliable format of assessment is that we follow the steps 1 to 6. And this is the moment for us to ask ourselves to reflect that which of these I know and which of these I need to know more, right? So I've touched upon each of these in, not a very indirect manner in some cases, like questions 1 and 2, for example, but I have surely shown you with examples questions 3, 4, and 5. Right? 6 again I have not discussed. So these are things for us to consider. Right. So performance-based assessment needs to cater to these 5 principles. These are the golden principles of assessment, which can establish the robustness and the fairness of any assessment that we do in class or outside of class, in standardized testing or for summative examinations. Okay, so we will look at these in the context of not psychometric tests, but classroom space. Okay, so we will look at these 5 principles: reliability, validity, authenticity, practicality, and washback in relation to our scope of teaching and assessment as classroom teachers, not for other types of assessment. So the scope of these 5 principles is only directed to performance-based language assessment. So how do we do that? So these are tiny questions that we need to ask ourselves to prove each of these or to satisfy each of these principles. So for reliability, have I created a rubric for assessing student responses on each task? Am I marking all my students throughout consistently, or is there, break in my marking, or is there inconsistency? So I have to be careful about that. I have to remind myself constantly. Right? Then for validity, is my assessment measuring what it is supposed to measure? So if I have, a goal, like I want to develop their reading and writing skills for academic purposes, then the first example that I showed you, reading, moving on to summarizing, taking the via route of text map and inline reading comprehension would be a good way of assessing their reading and writing skills. But if my goal is reading and writing, and I suddenly go to the concept of assessing speaking, then there will be a mismatch between what I want them to do and what task I am making them do. Right? So my task requirement and my learning objectives should not mismatch. They should have a proper match, and therefore my assessment can become valid. Authenticity, anyway, performance-based assessment means real-life performance, right? Holistic performance. So it caters to the principle of authenticity very well. However, in terms of practicality, it dips because it is time-consuming, it is laborious, and it requires a lot of knowledge and preparedness on part of the teachers. But that does not mean that we do not engage with this form of assessment. So that should not discourage us from using this form of assessment. And lastly, will my tasks and feedback produce a positive impact on my learners such that they see the event as a learning opportunity? Because as I told you, and you will also probably agree with me, that unless students are of the opinion that what they are doing is valuable for them, what they are getting from you is valuable and reliable, they will not take it forward in a way that they would have done otherwise, right? So to take our students into confidence, we have to ensure that we do this in a very systematic manner. So this is a statement by Bachman and Palmer, very useful for us and very reassuring, that you can use these principles according to context of use and in relative proportion of each other, and never the case that everything will be high at the same time. Okay, so to create a balanced, systematic and fair form of measurement, to reach out to most of our students and their needs. Okay, and as we engage in performance-based assessment, what we are doing is we are consciously moving away from, summative examinations and multiple choice questions, short answer questions, long answer or essay type questions, which mostly hover around remembering and sometimes in terms of understanding. But we need to engage our students to higher levels of cognitive complexity. Right? And therefore, we need to look at a simple model of the revised Bloom's taxonomy, and you will see that performance-based assessment actually fulfills these higher levels of the pyramid. And therefore, few things that you could do is look for production-based open-ended responses. Don't try to look for correct responses and one correct response, when you are practicing performance-based assessment. Encourage group work. Peer support is very important for them to understand that what they are doing has a real life connection and that it is valuable. And you can even engage with them by giving voice-based feedback. So you need not spend a lot of time writing feedback, because you do not have the real classroom with the blackboard. So in the virtual classroom, we are doing a lot of writing through emailing and posting responses and things like that. So if you feel that that's too much on you, you can even give voice-based feedback. That works very well. I have tried it out for one semester now, and it really is a very important mechanism to send feedback. So how to practice performance-based assessment during the year, during the semester or the course, whatever may be your educational system. So we need to do 3 steps. One is choose the integrated tasks that you want to use over a semester. 1 or 2 will suffice. You don't need to use your entire semester doing performance-based assessment. You can only use one part of it, okay, as an experimental form. And then if you feel more confident, you can shift to it. But for practicality purposes, 1 or 2 integrated set of tasks should be good enough for an entire year or a semester or a course. And then you have to design and share the rubrics of assessment for which you might need some colleague support, but very importantly, you need to confirm to this throughout the duration of assessment. So you maintain, system. So many a times we don't question our assessment. We don't assess we don't question our marking system, but many a times you will see that you as a person, you are not consistent across your marking. So we have to be careful, we have to be more reflective, we have to be more alert towards what we are doing and treat it as objectively as possible. I know it's very difficult, but let's make a beginning. I think it will surely work. And then we need to use the rubric, we need to use the rubric to assess and give feedback. So just assessment will not help. It has to go in tandem with feedback on student performance and therefore envisage a continuum of growth. Remember the arrow that I showed you at the beginning? It's a continuum of growth or change in student behavior, even if it is not a very subsequent growth, a substantial growth. It can be a change in student behavior over time, and that you can very easily observe irrespective of the classroom being a virtual one or a physical one. Okay, so now we will conclude the session. So now we have looked at the features and what are the benefits and how it can be practiced. Now let us turn the tables around and look at a few challenges so that we know what are the realistic, goals of using this kind of assessment and what might we be facing so that we have a preparedness for those challenges. Okay, so teachers, as I said, will need to move out of their comfort zones of unitary methods of content testing based on remembering information. That's the lowest part of Bloom's taxonomy. We need to move upwards. And if we need to do that, it comes with a cost. And what is the cost? It will be a laborious and time-consuming process. Okay, but very importantly, the third point, large groups need to be subdivided into manageable smaller groups or pairs, right? So this is something that you could do so that you reach out to all your students in a uniform manner or a near uniform manner. I wouldn't say uniform, but more or less you reach out to all the groups instead of every individual. To maintain reliability of assessment, teachers have to, this is very important, they have to chalk out rubrics and share them with students if the students are at a level where they can express their opinion on the rubrics. And it would actually be nice if you can negotiate the rubrics with your students. They would feel more motivated to work. I've seen this happening in my teaching assessment practices. And very importantly, students need to be motivated and prepared to participate in all the tasks planned by the tutor. So this is a psychological preparation. This is an affective factor, along with the academic factor. And very importantly, creating feedback, giving feedback and creating that final estimate will be a complex process, because you have to constantly ask yourself, am I being fair in creating the final estimate? Because the final estimate will not be a mathematical score anymore. It will be a psychological estimate of the change in student behavior over time. It's not easy, but I think it is, just because it is not easy, we don't throw it out of our realm, but because there are some advantages as well. And what are they? So the perks of using this mode of assessment are many, as it would engage students to learn by using the target language. So they would learn the target language by using the target language and accomplish tasks. So once they accomplish tasks, they would have a sense of achievement, that feel good factor, that they have real life use. The tasks have real life use. So the tasks are not merely classroom tasks, but they have real life use. Very importantly, they can preserve their work over time, and most of my students who have done portfolios with me have told them that it becomes an invaluable resource to them for future use. And they feel good that they have their work preserved in one place. Feedback cycles are likely to bring out attitudes and reactions of your students. So you have to face the student evaluation as well. So the moment you give them feedback, they will give you feedback how good or bad your feedback is. And therefore, you will see as they engage actively in this cycle, they would value the learning process much more over traditional tests. This is something that I can guarantee, with confidence, that they would value the learning process more over traditional tests. And by the end of one cycle, if you try it, I don't know whether you have already tried it, very good if you have already done so. But by the end of one cycle, just one cycle, you will be able to reflect on your professional gains and feel a lot satisfied than before. So I think if you have not tried it, it is a good opportunity. The pandemic has given us a good opportunity to up our skills and engage learners in a more creative and responsible manner. So try doing that. And these are the 3 PhD dissertations of the 3 students. I have recently supervised. They have, 2 of them have got their degrees. One is awaiting for her degree. And so these are the names, Vishali, Vasim, and Vikas. And these are the titles of their, dissertations. And I have included their email address very, very consciously, that when I share the PPT with you, you can get in touch with them. You can actually send your questions to them, because they are all a part of my extended assessment team. And I'm very proud to have this team, who have all worked in ways, in applications of performance-based assessment, from which I use the 3 examples. So the reading example was from Vishali's thesis, the writing example was from Vikas's thesis, and the speaking example was from Vasim's thesis. So these are well researched, so I'm not making empty claims, and these are based on years of practice. And therefore, you can even communicate with them to figure out more about performance-based assessment. And lastly, I have sent you a link, to a form which will help you review your understanding, because now we don't have time, in a real life workshop, I usually do this. So you can take your time to do this and send your responses to me. And if you wish to access this PPT, you can go to my webpage, on Academia Edu, on conference presentation, and I will upload it today. And another useful reference, as I said, that those of you who need more information, there are loads of books out in the world, but this is a book that I have written for IGNOU distance education teachers, so it's language testing for the ESL classroom. If you feel like, you can download a copy. It is uploaded on my Academia Edu page under books, and you can have a look at the book, which I have written primarily for school teachers, primary and secondary school teachers. So that might be useful. And in the end, thank you for your attention. Thank you for spending time, to join for this webinar, sitting through this 1 hour plus presentation very, very patiently. And I would like to conclude by saying all the best to all the participating teachers, researchers, to use performance-based assessment to accommodate your student needs. Yeah, please keep that in mind that we are doing this. It is a difficult process, but we are endeavoring to accommodate our student needs during the current pandemic situation. And who knows, we might be able to, continue with this beyond the pandemic situation. So that is the plus of the pandemic situation, isn't it? Let me know how the presentation went, and now we would take up questions. Thank you, everyone.
Good morning, madam. This is Siva. I'm going to be the moderator for this question and answer session. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, madam, for such an interesting session in the very morning of the day. We have got few questions from the audience. I would read out the questions one after the other. And I think if it is comfortable to you, you can answer those questions. And we have got a question from Miss S. Archana. She's asking that what are the tools we can use for assessing performance-based language, and will it be effective when compared to traditional assessment?
Yeah, I'll see the question. I will answer them together. So I'll get a breathing space as well, because I've been talking for such a long time.
Yes, yes.
So
yes,
I'll
please.
take down the questions. Yeah, so
Yes.
tools. Yes, and you continue.
And the second question is it possible to implement the performance-based language assessment in this pandemic? Mr. Manoj Kumar is asking this question. He's doubting whether it is possible to use this performance-based language assessment during these COVID-19 times. And then we have a question from Prahelika. She's requesting you if it is possible for you to share some of the resources and names of our books. I think you already said that the material you have written for IGNOU. And then if there are any further, I think you can help them out on this.
Sharing the presentation, so they will have the presentation, and there is a feedback form that they have to work with, so that will give them more
helpful to them. Yes. And there is a question from Krishnam Raju. He's asking, can the performance-based assessment be applied to a test like a single skill, for example, like speaking over a semester, and how I can check their progress? And is there any help on the rubrics for that kind of assessment? And then we have a question from Uma Chimirala. She's asking whether PBA is a criterion-based test, whether without seemingly being norm-based. If you agree, then is there a thinking neutral based for arriving at the criterion? She's asking, is there a thinking neutral base for arriving at the criterion? Because it looks like a criterion based assessment. And Dr. Veena Nair is asking us a question. She's asking, how do we use tasks for a large group of learners? Generally, we see this scenario in our classrooms. 60, 70 students are there sometimes in technical institutions. And how to use those tasks? And if you use for large group of learners, how would the teachers give individual assessment? So Veena Nair is asking at one place, how to take this assessment to the large sections, and how we have to end that with an individual assessment feedback. And then we have a question from Uma Ganga madam. How can we improve students' learning abilities? A more generic question, I guess. Probably we expect you from, interpreting it from the assessment point of view. All right.
Yeah.
And then we have a question from Jakaria Selvaraj. And he wants to have a quick brief on 5 questions. I think he means 5 areas of assessment. We will see. We can share this video anyway. He can go through it again, I guess.
Yeah.
And then we have a question from B.S. Padmavati madam. She's asking, how can we assess the attitude of the students toward the test while assessing online? So this is more of a psychological perspective question.
Yeah.
And then there is one question from anonymous audience. The person is asking, he or she is saying that professional training in assessment is required, as you mentioned it. What would you say is responsible to make the training available? Who is responsible? Who would you be responsible for making this training available? Maybe the questioner is asking us which bodies or which institutions we have to look in for this kind of training, I guess. These are
Well,
the
Vijay Lakshmi already created an opportunity for a large number of teachers, to get a mini training through these 4 days. So I think if you hang on to all the 4 days, you will get a substantial amount of training already. Yeah. Anything
yes,
else?
madam. These are the very important questions, madam. We can
So
proceed with
I
this.
have got 9 questions and I
Yes.
will respond to them one by one. And I think because everybody is listening in, so it will benefit all of us. I mean, as a collectively as a group. Thank you, participants, for posing these very important, significant, pertinent questions because these are real life concerns, as to how we fit in this model. But I would say that of the 9 questions that I have got, mostly in some way or the other, I have addressed them in my presentation, but I will reiterate certain important points. Okay, so when you say tools of assessments, now one of the things which you need to understand, and this is, I think, an orientation of our mind, that we do not have any ready-made tools of assessment as such. We have a theorization of assessment which we will have to apply to our respective local contexts, and therefore it is not a standardized testing tool or one thing that will fit every group. Okay, so we are consciously breaking away from that tradition and we are trying to bring in effectiveness of assessment and meaningfulness of it by relating it to our local context of teaching. So what we need to do, that is why I said it is a laborious process, it is a time consuming process, that just as we prepare ourselves for each and every teaching session, we have to prepare ourselves for the assessment, aligning it to the teaching, goals. So that is very important. And so I think I got another question on how to find sources for, assessing students. And also somebody raised a question that if we have to assess a single skill, then how we could get to rubrics. So generic rubrics, or as Uma said, that this is a criterion-based assessment. I didn't want to bring in so much technicality because I didn't know who I was addressing, so I kept it very simple. But as a starting point, what all of you can do is, if you already are not doing that, in your assessment practices, please refer to the CEFR. So CEFR has descriptions for each of the skills across 6 levels. So depending on which level, so now you can ask me, how do I know what is the level? So this is a matter of your teacher knowledge, teacher understanding, that you know which level your learners more or less can be aligned for. So, but I know that most of us work with heterogeneous groups. So some students might be slightly above than the average group, which is the majority of the learners, 50 to 60% bandwidth, and then the ones who are below that. So you might be working with 2 levels at the same time, but you can pitch your, assessment somewhere in the middle. So CEFR, Common European Framework of Reference, is a good, source to study and utilize. Okay, and it is freely available on, if you do a Google search, you can do get a PDF, and there is a companion volume of CEFR which has been released in 2019, which is on bilingual assessment. So those of you who are dealing with bilingual assessment can also look at that, right? So in order to use this assessment in a systematic manner and look at the concept of rubrics and its application, you can fall back on CEFR to begin with. Is something that I would strongly advise. And the second question, now I'll move to the second question, that whether it can be implemented during the pandemic. As I said, that now if you are a part of online classes, I have assumed that, when I did this presentation, what I had in mind is you are soon going to be a part of online teaching, or you are already practicing online teaching, so that's why I brought in the concept of COVID pandemic. However, if you are waiting, to do face-to-face teaching, then at the moment you will not be able to do it. But if you and your learners have access to the internet, and you are doing online classes, then this is possible to be done. And as I said, you don't need to, like I showed you the Bloom's taxonomy with the 6 levels in the pyramid, that you cannot attain the highest point in one course. You cannot do everything together. So you should set a mini goal, part of your course. Let's say you want to focus more on the speaking skills, but you cannot do it in a truncated manner. You cannot do it in a discrete manner. Then we are going back to the discrete point testing. So we have to integrate the speaking with other, attendance skills. So you could begin by giving them, sources to look at or sources to listen to, like podcasts, or they could read up some texts, on the basis of which they could do some speaking. And as they do the speaking, you could focus on, let's say, discourse features, fluency, using linkers, and of course, grammar and vocabulary, which are the building blocks of language. So one by one, you could take a few of these, which you can pack into your feedback, because doing the feedback systematically is a big deal. So all my researchers who have focused on, performance-based application of performance-based assessment, we have seen that to look at student estimates in a detailed manner or to give feedback takes time. So you cannot do everything at the same time, and you need not do everything at the same time. So our spirit is to improve, our assessment procedure to a little extent. So what you can do is choose a part of your course in which you are going to introduce performance-based assessment, which will complement your other modes of traditional assessments, like the summative examination, like the internal tests, or the mid-semester, whatever you call that. So those could be quizzes, those could be, long and short answers. So you don't need to throw them away. So it's not a either or, it's a complementary mode. And if you wish to do this, then you have to keep in mind that you need to build student estimates over time and not do one-time assessment. So you cannot get rid of, look at student performance, score it or mark it, and then you forget it. That you can. That is not the spirit of performance-based assessment, right? Because you don't get a whole. So because it's natural, isn't it? Like, say, for example, today I'm doing this presentation. Now, if I do it for the second time, chances are I will do a better job of what I have done, right? Because I'm getting one more round of practice. So even students, when they are performing, we don't need to judge them on their one-time performance. And therefore, we can do it over a period of time. And so again, I would go to the next question that, yes, I answered that this is a criterion-based assessment model for which you could readily use CEFR. But if it is, I don't know what you mean by thinking neutral, but I would still try to maybe engage with that by saying that this is not something which is generic in use. It is very, very localized. It is for the teacher to identify, a few of the units on which he or she would like to build the performance-based assessment. So this is not something that will work for everyone, unless, 5 schools or 5 colleges are using the same textbook. Right. So even then colleagues can do it differently, because it's a creative process. It's systematic. It is, methodical, but at the same time, it involves teachers' creativity. So no 2 teachers or 3 teachers will teach in the same manner. It's not possible, right? We don't mimic each other, isn't it? So like that, this criterion-based assessment or this rubric-based assessment, the rubrics have to be drawn out of the teaching goals and what I have dealt with my learners. I know what I have dealt with. I know what I need to give them more focus on. And therefore, the performance-based assessment will give me an opportunity to help them perform, give them feedback. And based on the feedback, they will again perform. Right? So it's a cyclical method. So therefore, we move from assessment of learning to assessment for learning. So the assessment becomes a learning tool. It becomes a mechanism for learning. And this is a conceptualization. This is a mental conceptualization, right? Okay. And so Veena, your question that, yes, I know we have to deal with, larger groups. And I mentioned in my presentation that what you can do again, either in online class or in, physical class, this is an assessment which you cannot, do individually. It is very difficult to do individually. So you need to set up small buddy groups across the semester or across the course and stay with them. So they are treated as one unit, and all the performance happens within the unit, and the student individual estimate that you get is a result of that communication. So you don't need to look at discrete point abstract learning of rules or memorization of content, for which our anxiety is more for memory-based testing. So we are moving away from that. So we are consciously building in group-based assessment. Unless you have like 10 students, you can afford to do it individually. But let me tell you, when you give feedback to the entire group versus mini groups, both have complementary roles to play. So they are not one against another. And from each feedback, learners will have something to learn. Like, for example, now, some 8 or 10 of you have raised questions, right? And now we are discussing. So all of us are learning through this, isn't it? So like that, when you give feedback, as long as it is focused feedback, based on what they have performed, they will be able to make those links. So therefore, we don't need to really feel anxious whether it is for every individual. What is more important is we are able to align their performance, what we get, to the feedback, that it makes sense to them, and they can take this as a cue to do a performance the next time around using those, cue questions or the points that you have given for feedback for further engagement with the language. And we cannot expect that within one course there will be substantial growth, but there will be some change in language behavior that we can expect, But how we can document that is something that the onus is on us. So the documentation part I have not discussed. Then if we move to the level of, action research, teacher becoming a researcher, we can discuss that. So that's why I kept it out of my presentation, because it's outside the purview of my presentation. And I think the learning abilities, you mean language learning abilities, right? So because it focuses on, integration of skills, and even if you were to focus, let's say speaking or writing, you can utilize the help of the surrounding skills. You need not look at it as one slice of cake and, not think of the rest of the cake. So it's all a part of that pie or the cake. You're focusing more on that, you're zooming in more on that, as a doctor, but it's not that you're not looking at the adjacent, areas. So it does not function that way. Then we go back to traditional assessment, discrete point testing, so on and so forth, right? So that is one. And for the very there's a question on attitude. Now, this is something that, it will build a lot of rapport with the students. Let me tell you, when you engage with this kind of performance-based assessment, because you are urging them to become more creative, more resourceful. So they have to come out of there. So if there are students who are shy, or who are they're not very attentive, so they don't really like to work hard, or they don't spend time on doing things which you ask them to do. So it will engage them, because there will be a group bonding, and they would know that the tutor would give them feedback in relation to the group work. So chances are that they will participate in the group performance, and some of it can be individual as well. Like, for example, writing. So it can be, complemented. So it can be balanced within individual and group. But however, I would say to begin with, you can just keep it at the group level. That would be useful. And I think it is an experiment which you should try out and document the attitudinal changes in your learners, because we as teachers will undergo huge amount of attitudinal change, because we'll become more conscious of the assessment process, and we will be reflective, just as we reflect on our teaching process, how we have done. Did it go well? Did I go according to my plan, or did I have to build something new to my plan? So these are attitudinal factors which will play a part in your success in practicing performance-based assessment, and also of your learners. So this is something to be studied. I don't have a ready answer for this, that what would be a good way to engage with or assess learner attitudes. This is something that will happen as a result of it, is what I can say. And for the focused training, I think it's a very good question. And so language assessment needs to be a movement. It is at the level of that, and the more we can have such kind of focused discussion, in groups, training each other, learning from each other's experiences, reading up a bit on theorization, which is why I've given you some, references. And also within my PPT, there are some references which I have hyperlinked. I have not shown it because I thought it would become more complex, or I didn't know whether it would work. So we have to read, we have to be a little more aware of the theorization of the construct, and very importantly, follow the checklist in our practices. So that is where the systematicity, the rigor of systematicity will come in. And it is difficult, but then it is also, as I said towards the end, it's a very satisfying process.
Thank you, madam. That's quite an elaboration and patient way of answering the questions. I think it had added a lot of value to the session itself. I think it's not just COVID-19. Your spirit itself is contagious. Our participants are all happy to follow you, and it's been a steady flow of attendees. I'm really thank you for that. Now I will hand over the session to the moderators, madam. Thank you. Have a good day, madam.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody. I am Paul Francis, Assistant Professor. Good morning, everybody. I am Paul Francis, Assistant Professor, proposing vote of thanks. At first, my heartfelt thanks to today's resource person, Dr. Leena Mahapadiai, Associate Professor FLU, for the talk on performance-based assessment. Yes, madam, we know the complexities of assessments, but your inputs will certainly help us to assess students' tasks more effectively hereafter. So we are very much grateful to you for spending your valuable time. I'd like to take this opportunity to place on record our hearty thanks to Dr. Ramanujam Parthasarathy, Director, ELT Center and advisor of the webinar, for his continuous guidance. Also extend my thanks to Dr. M. Vijayalakshmi, HOD of English, and also convener of the webinar. Also Mr. Rajkumar and Mr. Rajkiran, coordinators of this webinar, for meticulously planning and organizing this event. My deep sense of appreciation for the management, principal and vice principals of Godolphin Engineering College for their enormous support in organizing this event. Not but not the least, we are overwhelmed with joy by the enthusiastic participants. I thank each participant who take part in today's session. We also hope you will continue the same support for the following 3 days of the webinar. Please notice this. You are going, all the participants, you are going to receive a feedback form of this session. Please fill in the form and send it back to us. And you are going to receive another link for tomorrow's webinar. Kindly follow the link and join in time. Thank you all for joining today's session.
I would just like to add that there is a form link that Mr. Raja will share with the participants. So kindly fill that in, and in that you will see that I have included the source of my PPT and all the resources that I talked about. And in case you want to get back to me with your experience, because I'm very much interested in knowing, what are your takeaways and are you going to use this mode of assessment in your real life, virtual or physical classroom. And if you would like to share the experiences with me, I have shared my email ID. And you can also look at the email IDs of the 3 researchers that I shared on one of my slides. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I also really enjoyed the session and the question answer session, most importantly. And I'm looking forward to Professor Rama Matthew and Dr. Vijaya's session in the subsequent 3 days. And thank you, all of you.